Welcome to the Honest Designers Show, your transparent look into life as a modern designer. My name's Tom and I'm the founder and CEO at Design Cuts, and this week I'm joined by fellow Brit and hand lettering professional Ian Barnard, American retro design master Dustin Lee, and the incredibly talented South African illustrator Lisa Glans. In this week's episode, we talk all about clients. Often designers can joke about how clients are the enemy, but this week we discuss how a healthy client relationship can actually be a wonderful thing. Keep listening to discover some actionable tips on how to improve your client relationships, how to attract the right types of clients, and how to minimize any potential headaches along the way. Let's get into the show. So this week we're talking all about clients, which is, we've all worked with clients, and I know Ian and Lisa, you still do, but we've all done a ton of freelance work over the years, and I think there's a whole spectrum of stuff with clients, like how to manage them, the good clients, the bad clients, and I don't know about you guys, but I think clients kind of get a bad rap in the design community. I know on social media, it's like the common thing for designers to post memes moaning about clients and how awful they are or ignorant they are. And in my mind, that's like a restaurant owner moaning about people who eat food. Like, I don't fully get it. So this week, I didn't want to sit and moan about clients with you guys for an hour. I don't think that's necessarily helpful, but I thought we could delve into like some personal experiences and just how to like really get the most out of your clients, because it can be a fantastic relationship. It should be. These are the people, you know, supporting you, making a living, doing what you love.
I think we mentioned in a previous one about the communication with the client really helps. So I think, you know, they do get a bad rap. I think the problem is on social media is that you only see the bad things about them because the good things are not that funny. So
Sure.
I think that yeah, if you're having sometimes things go through the gap if you don't communicate properly, and that can bring frustrations and just like with any relationship really, that if you don't communicate properly with them, it can turn sour. And so I think good communication with the client is important from the sort of get-go to build that relationship and have a good relationship. And yeah, I've definitely had my share of really good relationships, and it could be because sometimes you have like a dream job, and obviously it depends on the relationship with the client, how well that dream job goes. But sometimes I've had really what I thought was going to be a boring job be really good because the client was really good. So
that's true.
Yeah, it's very much swings and roundabouts with that. But
I mean, you can definitely sense if it's the client's business or they work for it, you can sense their passion for it. So if they've been tasked with going and finding a designer and they're hating every minute, that's going to come into the project. But I've worked with some business owners who love their business, and then it's really cool to, you know, brainstorm with them and be like, okay, how can I bring this to life and bring your ideas to life with my skill set in design? So that can definitely be really cool. I mean, have you guys got any standout memories of, you know, amazing clients? And you don't need to list who they were, but just the experience.
Well, for me, because of my graphic design business that I had for all those years, I had kind of one long-standing corporate client that, and within that corporate sort of company, I had a few people that I dealt with, and there were one or two that I really built quite a good relationship with, and I really enjoyed working with them a lot. And even though the job sometimes was fairly mundane, as Ian was saying, you can actually end up having quite a good time doing the job because the client is quite an enjoyable person to work with and communicate with. And I think over time, they get to know your personality, and then they get to know your work style and what you produce. And then, you know, conversely, you get to know what they like and their taste and their personality. So it ends up being like this pretty cool, almost friendship kind of thing happening. And then the result is like you happy doing the design work, they're happy with what you're producing, and it just get stronger and stronger, like with each job, and that kind of setup is really awesome. I mean, that can only get better and better, for everybody concerned. So it's a good thing to strive for, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And we talked a second ago about it being like a relationship. You can get some pretty long-term relationships.
Yeah, mine were really
Like
long.
you can literally work with the same person for years.
Yeah.
And it should get better and better, like you say. And business, like regardless of whether it's design, any business relationship comes down to the people. Like even in the super corporate world, it really comes down to how much people like each other and like dealing with each other.
Oh, absolutely. It is exactly that. And the good thing is that when that happens is that they can also point out stuff in a way that you won't be offended by. Like, you're not so precious about your work anymore because you know that this is actually a win-win for both of you. So when they give you feedback, it's actually coming from a place of they want the best of that job, rather than, oh, this guy just wants to look like he knows better than me, kind of thing. So as a result, you get better as a designer because you get to know what clients want more, and they get a better job in return. So it really is a good thing to aim for that kind of relationship building, for sure. Yeah.
And just to extend the metaphor, if it is like a long-term relationship, I think the early days are where there's like perhaps potential for distrust, or you're feeling each other out, and they're thinking, are they ripping me off? And you're trying to get a read on them as well. And like an actual long-term relationship, all the trust and stuff like that will build over time as well. So any of that initial kind of awkwardness should fade away.
Yeah.
And be replaced by something a little bit deeper and more meaningful, you would hope.
Definitely. And what's so nice about sorry, I was just going to quickly say, what's so nice about that kind of situation is that they end up not even having to brief you anymore. They just say, okay, I need this done. I need it by Friday. Can you do it? And they just know you're going to pull it off, and you know exactly what they want. And that's easy sailing, it's much easier. Sorry, Ian, you were saying.
Cool. So I think it's nice to start with like a good example. It's like, this is what you aim for.
Yeah.
And it can exist.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Sorry, Ian, mate. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say, if it involves flowers and chocolates as well in this long-term relationship, it's always a bonus.
Oh yes, once a year for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's normally around the 8-year mark. You can start spooning your clients and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay, but Dustin, you did client work back in the day, right? I know you don't freelance anymore, but what was your perception of clients? Like, did you have the good, the bad, and the ugly thing going on?
Yeah. I think I started by having a lot of really bad clients, and it wasn't their fault. It was my fault because I was looking for clients in all the wrong places. I was looking on Craigslist and 99 Designs. I think I was just desperately trying to get jobs. And so I was putting myself in positions where clients expect you to be a certain way. So it was just, I think, bad choices because I was starting. I think we kind of all go through that. But I noticed for me, it started to get better when I started to just reach out to people that I really liked what they were doing. And I started to work on more personal projects. And then at first it was really hard to get clients. Then I got a couple that I really liked. And then those people would recommend me because I was getting ones I was really excited about. So then they would know other people that related to that. And then that started to spread out into more clients that were like that also liked the work. So I think for me, the best clients came when I kind of stopped being as desperate, I guess, or as afraid of not having stuff, not making money. Yeah.
We've touched on it before, but I think referrals are so powerful for that reason. Like, they just seem to up the quality, because especially if it comes from a good source, it's very unlikely they're going to have a terrible friend.
True.
So it tends to kind of spiral upwards, really. From my experience, at least, where each person who refers me on, it seems to give me an even better client to work with, because they just seem to, like, if you had to think of one of your friends, you wouldn't pick your worst friend. You'd probably pick out your best one.
Yeah. That's so true.
To all my friends listening, you're all great.
You're all besties.
I'm glad you had to put that
You're
in.
all my best friend. Yeah.
If I could extend the metaphor of the relationship even further, I think when you first get in contact with the client, it's always good to make sure that you've got what your future, how you want the relationship to pan out, I suppose. So just like when you
That's a good point.
are in a relationship, and if you don't, maybe this is quite a big thing, but like when you don't discuss whether you want kids or not. So you can't like get down 5 years in the row and then you're like, oh, I don't want kids. And this person's right, well, I do want kids. And that
Sorry, you've lost me. Is this the client still?
but
No, I know what you mean.
But you know, you want to put a good grounding of like
Expectations.
you need to list a lot of stuff. You know, you need to put out a sort of foundation of how you want that relationship to work. Otherwise, you'll get down the line and you'll say, well, actually, I don't work like this. And like, well, that would be good to being told at the beginning. And so
Yes.
I think, yeah, maybe put out, you know, exactly how it works or how you work. And say, this is me. How do you know? And it's always good, really, if you can. I know it's not possible, and a lot of my clients I don't ever see, but to, you know, when you can meet face to face over a coffee, it's really good to set out, you know, this is how I work. Will that work for you? And just that honesty, really, because it then clears the air for anything for them to take advantage, because they might not be knowing, you know, you're taking advantage, or, you know, of how you work and the hours, and you know, and putting up barriers as well, because you know you can always be you know, clients, you know, because the thing that sometimes can be a real big thing is when they just drop it on your desk on like a Wednesday morning and want it by Wednesday evening.
Yeah.
And you know, they need to know that is not possible to do. But if they don't know that from the start, they don't know. They think you just, you know, you can click your fingers and it comes. But if you can say to them, you know, I will be working on multiple projects. You know, I'm seeing other people,
Yeah.
seeing other clients,
Yeah.
and just be as honest as you can up front, so that it doesn't lead to things becoming sour in the future.
Yes.
Yeah.
1,000%. Like, I would really underline that for anyone listening, because it might sound quite obvious, but I didn't do it, and I'd imagine you guys probably didn't do this either from day one. It's something you need to kind of learn through, you know, being burnt by bad experiences. And I think you should really combine it, so you can have the sit-down meeting or the personal phone call and do all the charming and winning them over stuff. But I think it really helps to have some kind of like brand document where it outlines in writing all of that kind of stuff. And it can be like, here's how we work and our approach, down to all the stuff that Ian talked about, where it's like, here are my working hours. Here's how many revisions I tend to allow in a project. Because if you don't have any of that outlined, and I think it is important to do it both, you know, vocally and in writing. I've certainly had it where the client will be ringing you up at all hours, wanting revision number 17, and they're not going to pay you until it's perfect, and it's exhausted 4 times as much time as it should have done. That's where all the bad stuff that people make memes about and complain about comes. But like Dustin says, that's on you. That's your fault for not actually addressing it
Not
up
being
front.
clear. Yeah.
Completely. And I think like communication and transparency, even more than that, are the key things here, because you can be really candid and people only appreciate that. Like if you're sat down for coffee and you're like, I'm going to be honest, like I'm not hiding anything here. I am literally working on this project and 2 others, but I'm really passionate about your business and I would love to work with you. But please know I'm juggling exactly 3 projects, and therefore, you know, here's the time window you can expect to get stuff back in. But be aware, I'll always do my best to accommodate this. But you know, you say all that stuff up front, there's no surprises. Like, you're not hiding anything away. And I think what scares a lot of clients is they don't understand design. So I know a lot of people, a lot of clients and potential clients who've worked with other designers, and they've admitted they're scared of what they don't know. So they think they could be ripping me off and it could take them an hour, but they charge me 10 because I don't really know how this stuff works. Like, it's up to you to really just give them the most transparent look into everything that you possibly can.
I know I mention it like on every episode, but going back to the builder,
Yeah.
Do you want to be a builder?
Are you good friends?
Yeah,
with this builder by this point?
I was just thinking that, you know, when you speak to them, they go, well, I've got this big job coming up. I've got a week in between that and the new one starting, so I can fit you in here, if it's a small. And then you go, oh, yeah, that's fine. And you have no quibbles about that.
Yeah.
And they're being honest up front. And I suppose, and I, saying, why shouldn't it be like that with, design and with your clients, saying, okay, I've got a few projects on at the moment. I can give you a couple of days here and then outline roughly what you might be able to do with that. Obviously, the problem with design is that you get the creative element, which can take 5 minutes, can take 5 days. But, if it's something that is easy to sort of estimate how long it's going to take, then you can give them a rough idea of how and when you're going to be working on it, I suppose.
Yeah.
I think too, giving a gesture to disarm people can be really useful. So I'll just use an example of something that happens in my business. So I had a customer write me the other day and ask, is this product a good fit for me? And it was, like a $29 or $39 product. And she described how she wanted to use it and all these different things. Well, it'd be really easy to say, oh, I think that will probably work for you and get the money. But I decided, no, I always try to tell the truth about it. So I said, no, I don't think that will be. And I gave her some reasons and she didn't buy it. But she also wrote back and was like, oh man, I so appreciate you telling me honestly, like, I know you lose a sale by doing that and I appreciate that. And I think that it kind of applies to clients too. I think they are afraid of being burned. And I think that a simple thing of being like, here's another client I had, I can't show their name, but here's so you can see exactly what happened and what the prices were. I think by just like opening a little crack into what your life is like and what it really looks like to them makes them feel like, okay, they're like honest with me. This is really what happens. And then you just start to trust them a lot more because they disarmed you with that.
Yeah, and I like the example there of customer service because that's how I think about clients. Like, you can do all the same kind of stuff that you would to wow your customers, and you should, possibly even more so for clients, because you're going to have less clients than customers, very likely.
Yep.
So you really can go above and beyond, and that's everything from being open and transparent to you could get them a personalized gift when you've done a few projects together, or just some cool personal gesture like that. It's like you wouldn't expect a waiter in a restaurant to be really down or angry towards you when you're a customer there. So if you're emailing them or calling them and you're like always really professional but positive and happy and passionate about the project, all of that comes across as well. So I think designers, some of them at least, need to look beyond just, well, my job is to provide the design. It's to build the relationship and provide amazing service. And over deliver really would be the key word.
I mean, I used to do a lot of, this sounds quite crazy, but I used to do a lot of like psychological sessions with some of my clients. I mean, you sometimes you have to listen about their family or the trouble they're having at home or the kid that's, bad at school or, but that all goes it's all part of the relationship, and I think the main thing that I remember is, especially, when you're a freelancer and you basically are the one that's making your company work, so if you crappy at your job, then your business isn't going to work. And I just knew that I kept thinking in the back of my mind, I need to make this person's life as easy as possible. And if it means listening to them for 10 minutes on the phone because they're having a really bad day about their kid that's really ill and, this kind of thing. And I promise them that I'll get the job done in 2 hours instead of like 2 days or whatever, then I know they're going to be so happy with me. They'll use me definitely next time, So you got to think of being the best thing that ever happened to them for that day kind of thing. I know it's not always possible, but at the same time, you don't want to shoot yourself in the foot because that can also backfire. But it's a balance. It's a sure balance. And also when you get to a point where you are servicing your clients really well, you get some clients that push that a little too much. I don't know if you guys had the same thing where they'd give you a job on Friday and want it by Monday, and that kind of implies you have to work over the weekend. And I did that once or twice and never again. It's just, I don't know. I guess you have to measure how much you're willing to put in to keep the relationship going. But for me, I just knew there was a spiral if I kept that up. and I'm not so sure if that was
Yeah.
such a good idea.
I mean, maybe there the communication thing could be like, look, I can tell you're in a tight spot, so I'm going to work over my weekend because I really want to help you out.
Yeah.
But just to be clear, this isn't typically how I work. And I
Yes.
probably can't in the future. And that way you can kind of wow them and retain them. But next time it happens, you're like, do you remember
Exactly.
we talked about this?
You know, it's
not gonna work for me.
it's true. It's a good point. You must point out the fact that you have gone above and beyond, because I think they often don't realize that. So they don't know that you've like been doing, you know, an all-nighter on their job. You know, you got to tell them that.
I keep thinking now about this ongoing metaphor we're using. It literally is like a relationship. It's like, you take me for granted.
It's
like, no, I don't.
exactly like that. It really, really is. Yeah.
Well, and I like your point about telling them what you did. When I worked at restaurants when I was like 18 years old, I had a manager, and I remember him telling me, he said, you got to tell people what you did to get credit for it, because no one else is going to tell people. And I always thought that at first, I thought, oh, that's kind of like a not good piece of advice, or kind of like a very self-serving piece of advice. But it's then the more I thought about it, I was like, it's so true. Like, you do have to tell people, like, working over the weekend is not something I do. I gave up my weekend to do this. Like, not giving them a guilt trip, but just letting them know, like, I did this, or this was something special I did for you, and not making it a guilt thing, but making it more like, I care about you and I'm trying to help you.
Yes.
And I went out of my way because I want to make your life easier.
Exactly.
And I just think it's important you're right. It's important to acknowledge it
For sure.
in a friendly way.
Yes.
Guilt trip way.
I think from my experience, accountability is key. And that might sound obvious, but I certainly, in the earlier days where I might have been studying or something like that and freelancing on the side, I would treat it like a essay deadline, like I could get an extension or something. And I would occasionally be late on deadlines and stuff like that. And from experience, that is the worst thing to do to a client.
Oh, yeah.
And you wouldn't expect it the other way around. So again, it's kind of an obvious point, but I think if you're delivering good work of a high standard, like bang on time or even better early, that seems to be like the biggest plus for every client.
Definitely.
Agreed.
I used to, because I was fairly fast at, I don't know, maybe it was the particular jobs I used to get. I used to actually hold them back and not give them, you know, I would give them in a just like at a time that I knew would be good for them. You know, they'd still be really happy that I delivered it in such a short time, but not to the point where they'd go, oh, well, if she can do that in 2 days, well, then she can do it in 1 hour, you know. So
You don't want to set a precedent.
yeah. So I think if you are pretty fast, you also kind of have to balance that as well, because you don't want to be, you know, pumping the stuff out and then they just expect more and more and more and more and more of you, you know.
That reminds me of this
Yep.
thing I heard about, like, interface design, where they were talking about, like, I think it was like a travel website or something like that. And, you know, it calculates the best deals on hotels or something. And they were saying we had to increase the time it took for the search to process, even though it didn't take that long, because when it happened like that, they felt like the service wasn't valuable. But if it kept processing for a little bit longer, it felt like, well, it must be doing a really
that's
good job
hilarious.
since it took an extra 2 seconds.
Yeah.
So I think it is true.
Yeah.
Like you might sit around thinking about something forever, and, you know, or you sleep on it and you get all these great ideas. But yeah, I think that's an interesting point.
I've got a slightly different tip actually, to realize that the client is going to be a different type of person than you are, as in they're not going to be an uber design nerd and they're not going to care about design as much as you. So to put yourself in their shoes, which it can be difficult to do. So if you're a designer but you don't really care about business or corporate stuff, it can be difficult to try and, you know, muster up all this passion presenting a project, being like, look at what this is going to do for your bottom line or your business or your brand or whatever, and to put all this stuff to one side where it's like, by the way, I did 500 sketches to get to this point and look at how much I geeked out on this project. Like, they don't ultimately care about that. Just like an investor only cares about making their money back.
Yeah.
And so I think it's realizing those differences, because I would talk to you guys as fellow designers completely differently about this stuff than I would talk to a client.
Oh, definitely. I mean, you can't You know, it's I think a lot of designers make the mistake of making an assumption that the client understands a whole lot of things that without an explanation. So for example, especially if you're pitching for a brief, you got to really speak to them like as if you kind of talking to somebody for the first time about this concept without, you know, leaving out all those details that you think, oh, they're obviously going to know that. You know, it's so important to get that across well, because then they feel like they're also part of the process of you know, the concept. You know, it's not just something that was thrown at them. I think designers forget about that and they just go, oh, you know, look at the logo that I just designed for you, and they're like, okay, what does that mean? You know. Yeah,
I mean that's like it takes finesse to do that.
Yeah.
Though, right?
Yeah.
Because that can be as subtle as like starting to mirror their language and the words that they use as opposed to the designery words that you might use. Yeah, it's like a real art form, and I think it's kind of the key to a lot of successful business and client and customer care and all of that stuff is just getting them to like the way that you do things.
And reasoning behind why you do stuff that you do as well. So, you know, explaining why you've chosen a certain colour, why you've chosen a certain font. Because it might be the case you just go, here are, what do you think? And, you know, I think you need to explain and say, you know, I've done this because, and I've done this because, obviously, you know, you're the person, it's your company. But, you know, from a design standpoint, this is, you know, giving reasons so that they feel confident. Oh, okay,
he actually thought about it.
He didn't just bosh it together with the latest, trendiest font or anything. So,
educate them basically is a huge part. Like I'd say that's second, really, behind communication. Like you really need to educate them, and in the most basic way possible.
Yeah,
and also hand holding as well, just leading them through. You know, the hand holding begins at the start, and I suppose it continues through as you you sort of lead them through the project. I suppose
it's so true, because even when I was kind of starting out as a freelancer, and I really felt intimidated by all these corporate clients, and I don't know if you guys had the same thing where you went to these meetings with these kind of suits, and you thought, well, you know, here I am, this little young girl trying to come off as somebody that knows what they're doing. But the thing is, ultimately, they're actually clueless about design, and you must remember that as a designer, and you actually are the expert in the field. So don't feel shy or intimidated to, as Ian said, take them by the hand and literally walk them through the process, walk them through your thought process, the designing, the whole thing, because they don't know it. They don't know that stuff, and even though they've been a CEO of some big corporate forever, they actually don't have a clue about this stuff. So you do have an upper hand, and if you should use that to your advantage. And when you speak well about the project, especially if you show your passion and your thought process, they trust you, you know, and it's much easier to get them to go with your first or second design instead of having to go through layers and layers and layers of changes. I mean, that was my technique anyway.
A good word to sort of think about when you're in this is just care. You know, care about the client, care about the job, you know, care about the work you put in, stuff like that, and then that will show. That will show to them. That will show through, you know, within the relationship. So, and it will really, and you think each time that you do that, you know, they will tell other people, or it will show in your work, or it will just make, I think, your whole design business better if you just care about those elements.
And what do you guys think about not just educating them, but actually you obviously need to get information back from their side in the form of a brief, which is something we haven't touched on yet. So have you got any tips for the best way to get like the clearest possible brief? Because if you've got an ambiguous brief, it's more likely that you're going to give them something they don't want or they don't like. So I've seen everything from like scripted conversations to client surveys, like, have you found anything particularly effective to get like a crystal clear idea of what they actually want?
With the logo design, I used to send them a questionnaire, because people come along and go just with no idea. It's not their fault. They have an idea, but they can't communicate
Articulate it.
it. So the questions would pull out maybe colours they like, examples of work they've seen.
Sorry, just to interject, I had that one myself, and it was always really awkward when they were like, I really love these designs and they're hideous. And it's like, okay, I'm not going to give you something like them.
That makes it even more creatively challenging when they give them something, and you're just like, oh, okay, that's the idea you got. But giving a broad range, like a mood board, getting them to do like a Pinterest board is really helpful, because getting examples of what they've seen something and they think, oh, this is really nice, and maybe getting them to explain why they think it's really nice. And maybe before you've even designed something, maybe you say, can I give you my opinion on why, or which ones that you think look really good. Maybe narrow it down before you've even started designing something, so you can get a clear idea of what they are after. So
it's worth putting in the upfront work.
Definitely.
Possibly more time there than you think you should, because I guarantee it will reduce the headaches down the line.
Yeah,
because you don't want to go and design something and they come back and go, I hate it. And you're like, well, and then you have to go and do it again, right? Anyway. So save yourself time and a headache, like you say, and just make sure that you're both clear with what both parties want. I think I found that recently I found that much easier, because I'm niching, and they hire me for a particular style. But when I was doing more generic graphic design, they would come along with an idea of, so they've seen something online mainly, and that's the sort of thing they're looking for, or competition. Their competition within a certain marketplace, they might want to steer away from or be in line with.
I heard an interesting question, because when I was starting, I was looking into like what questions do people ask when they're trying to design like logos or brands for people. And one of my favorites that I found that people did, and I tried it and found it helpful, was they would ask things like, if your company was a fast food brand, what fast food brand would it be? Or if your company was a car company, what car company would it be? And they'd go through a variety of different brands that are unrelated to the industry they're in, just to get a sense for like what are the ethics or the values that connect with your company.
Okay.
And I think it was just like a shorthand way to like kind of like get a feel for the area that someone's in terms of the way they think about their business. For instance, if you're doing, I don't know, like if you're doing whatever company and they say like, you're like, what kind of shoes would your shoe company be if it was your company be if it was a shoe company? And they say, well, we'd be Tom shoes.
Don't say Crocs.
Yeah, if they said Crocs, you'd be in trouble. But like, let's say they say we're Tom shoes. That tells you a lot, right, about what they think is important in their business, as opposed to if they say they're Adidas or something like that.
I did the similar.
Maybe that's dumb. I thought it was fascinating.
I like it.
I was just saying, I did a similar thing to Ian, where I had a kind of a questionnaire, especially if I wanted to do branding. If they came to me for branding. But the one of the important questions that I asked was what is the projection or the feeling they want the customer to get from their brand. And I think a lot of people leave out that emotion part of the whole branding process, because I think when you speak feelings, clients find it easier to talk about that, because they want to say, I want them to think that we're sophisticated and, Lani and fancy and all this kind of thing. Or they want to say, oh no, we're earthy and we homegrown and we organic. And so those kind of words, if you can get those words out of the clients, I think it's more helpful. It's quite helpful.
Yeah. Not just helpful, but inspiring.
Yeah, it also helps your process.
As a designer.
Yeah, for sure.
Like when you were saying those words, I started designing stuff in my head. Whereas if it was like really uninspiring, insipid words, you'd be like, yeah, I've got nothing to go on
Yeah,
there.
and often you'd have to. It's a good point that you mentioned, because often you'd actually have to help them along, because initially the adjectives don't come so easily to them. So you can, you help them along. You say, do you want to look professional? Do you want to look, this or that? So, and it slowly sort of triggers a brainstorming with them, because it doesn't come naturally. I
Yep.
think
That does sound quite overwhelming if you were just starting out in the business.
it does.
But
The whole process.
I think, it's great if you can spend some time on it and put something in place, because then you just do the same thing every time.
Yeah.
As in, ask similar questions. You'll find that certain questions are better than others, and don't feel overwhelmed. Just know that it's just things to sort of start putting in place if you are starting out. Or
Yeah, and like you say, you should be recycling this over and over again
Yeah.
until it becomes second nature. Like when you've had that conversation and done that questionnaire 10 times, you're going to start to see patterns and get very natural with it.
Yeah.
So it definitely is worth that time up front.
Definitely.
I think one thing for me is maybe not right at the start, because then you're just trying to get any clients on board, really. But when you start getting a bit of momentum, I actually think it's really helpful for you to come up with your ideal kind of client. And this is something we actually did at Design Cuts. We got on a whiteboard and we drew our ideal type of customer. And when you actually put that out into what you're doing, it's amazing. It's like a magnet for that perfect kind of customer or kind of client. And if you've just got an ambiguous idea of, well, I'll take any client going, I'll take a client with money, then you really could get anyone.
Yeah.
But if you start really starting to think about the kind of personalities or size of business or type of business or morals or character, like all that stuff should really go into you finding your ideal client. And I think beyond that, you should be thinking, well, do I want small one-time projects or do I want the long relationship?
Yeah.
And I would always advocate the long relationship,
Definitely.
because otherwise you're constantly looking for new work and you don't really have that security in your business. Whereas if your ideal kind of client is someone you do an initial job for, but you realize they're going to need ongoing either maintenance work or like little jobs here and there on a consistent basis for years, that's every designer's perfect client, because then you can foster that relationship and nurture it and have a constant buffer stream of work where, it's not like, oh, I need to find 2 new clients every month, otherwise I'm going to go out of business.
Yeah, that's horrible, stressful. I must say, I never had that problem. So yeah, whoa, it's horrible. Sorry.
I've kind of done both a little bit. And
Really?
It is horrible. You do a great job and they're really happy with it, but they don't need you anymore. And it's like,
Yeah.
oh, back to square one. I need to find an entirely new client who was that good. And it's so much better if you can have the long-term relationship. And if we're extending the metaphor again, if you do it the other way, it's like constantly having one-night stands or something.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, like it's not going to be that satisfying.
No.
And I think that, like, we touched this on a previous one, where you have a think about where your interests lie in, whether it's, I know, sometimes people want to do everything from websites to branding to stuff like that, but trying to niche down a little bit into maybe certain areas, you want to work, because we did mention about, like, if you wanted to just do like church websites, but be the best church website producer in the UK, or whether it's specific things you want to do on branding, startups and stuff like that. It's making a coherent portfolio. So, because they do look at what you're doing, and, if they can clearly see that you'll be a perfect match for them, then that helps at the beginning as well. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't want to sound arrogant here, because we're definitely all learning as we go. But the more I listen to you guys, I kind of want to put all of this into like an organized book or something, because it's a lot of stuff.
It is
and
a lot of
think
stuff.
We're trying to paint like a blueprint of everything you need in every area. But yeah, I'm going to talk to you guys later, hopefully, about putting this into at least some kind of guide
Yeah.
or blueprint, because I think that could be helpful. If you're listening and that would be helpful, let us know in the comments,
Yeah.
because we've been getting a lot of really cool feedback, which we definitely appreciate.
Yeah, I must be honest. If I knew from the beginning of my freelance career that I should have a questionnaire and I should have a way of pulling information out of a client in terms of a brief, man, I'd be so much happier. I kind of found that out the hard way. So yeah, it would be helpful, I think, for people starting out to at least get an idea of what kind of questions to ask, what they should be looking for, what kind of clients, maybe even an idea of what kind of clients they want, that kind of stuff, because that also sets you up for what kind of business you're going to have. So that's helpful.
Yeah, just like a worksheet or something could be interesting.
Yeah.
I might still have my questionnaire somewhere, so I can.
Really?
There we go. We can get Ian Barnard's
Yay.
original freelance
Yeah.
questionnaire from back in the day. Cool. We've sort of avoided the horror stories here, and I think the point of that, like we said at the start, is because they shouldn't be necessary.
Yeah.
But I guess it's important to make the point that if you are getting a real bad experience and you're doing everything right, so you're communicating, you're being upfront, you're over delivering, you're doing everything great from your side. If the client is treating you badly, don't be afraid to get out of there. Like, don't bankrupt yourself in the process. Try and have a buffer or find a new client to replace them. But as long as you can financially do it, I think it's worth some potential short-term difficulties to just get away from that toxic client relationship, because there are a lot of fantastic, wonderful clients out there for you to work with.
They definitely are. And also, I have to mention that even, if you have a toxic client, you also have to analyze, is this somebody I can actually rehabilitate, so to speak? Or
You can't change people, Lisa. Let's get cynical.
yeah, because sometimes it's actually a case of sitting down and having an honest conversation and telling them, this we're not doing right, and this we're getting wrong, and this is actually not working out. Can we make it work? If it's not going to work, then obviously it's really no good in hating your job and hating going to work every day. But
it would be the same in an office, right?
Yeah.
It's being a bit firm and assertive where you need to
Yeah.
be. Like, you want to bend over backwards for the client or make them feel like you are,
Yes.
but not let them walk all over you.
because you have to also be honest with yourself and analyze, okay, which part is actually my fault? Like, as Dustin said, have you allowed them to, literally bulldoze you and take advantage of you? Because ultimately, if it is your fault, you're just going to do that again with your next client. So it's an opportunity to kind of analyze, is this like totally them? Are they the total idiots in this whole equation, or do I have a role to play? And that's an opportunity to learn, because that's how you grow as a freelancer, and that's how you get stronger in running your business. So you can't just assume that every client situation that's not going well is always their fault, because I think that's where designers maybe get that a bit wrong.
Dustin, I know it's been a while since you freelanced, but you're kind of more in the client role these days.
Mm-hmm.
Have you had something stand out to you as a client where you've been like, man, like that was really, really good from the designer, like that really impressed me?
Yeah. Well, what Lisa had said about being on time, I think when that happens a couple times, you start to feel really confident in the person. And communicating clearly. So I have a freelancer who does something for me every week. Every single week she delivers something, and it's due on Wednesday. And every week on Wednesday, almost always, she sends it to me. And anytime she doesn't, she lets me know in advance, and she says, I'm going to be a little bit late. I'm going to be 12 hours late. And I don't care. I mean, honestly, I don't care if it's 12 hours late. She really doesn't need to tell me. But the fact that she does tell me makes me feel really good about her. So yeah, I think the communication and being on time is massive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Have you found it weird going through the transition of being the freelancer and now being the client?
I think that looking back on it, I realize why I struggled so much in the beginning. Like when you are the client, You know,
Yeah.
like then you start to realize the things that bother you, and then you're like, oh, that's why like that didn't work out. I see why like I wasn't so good at that. It's because I didn't do this. So yeah, I think if you're a designer, you should be a client. Like maybe that's like something every designer should do is be a client.
Is be a client, yeah, and be aware that we're going to be having more empathy for the designer than most clients are,
Yeah.
Right.
because we are designers. Most clients don't really care,
No.
and
Right.
they shouldn't.
You know, that just made me think of something I tried. So this is a little like weird. If you want to go a little like farther out to figure out how people do it, is find people you really admire that have design businesses doing something similar to you, and pretend to be a client. Like, just I know this is a gray area, and you do what you're comfortable with.
Waste their time.
But like I'll give you an example. Like I had like this design company in Vancouver, Washington, where I live, that I really admired. So I called them and pretended to be an interested client. And I just wanted to hear, like, how do you have a conversation with me? Like, what will you send me? What will you do? Is that wrong? I don't know. Like, maybe it is because you're wasting some of their time.
I kind of like it.
But like, it told
Well,
me so
you're not
much, like, because they were doing so good. Like, so then I got an idea, like, oh, like, well, here's what they do. So now I can help myself not look so dumb or make the mistakes I'm making. I don't know. Is that wrong? Can you guys tell me? Is that wrong?
No, I think if they were doing work for you, that would be wrong. But them sending out a standard client brief, they must send hundreds of those things out every month. So, yeah, I don't think it's wrong. I think it's pretty smart, to be honest. We're now going to have
I was just thinking
like
this.
hundreds of conversations happening across the country with like spoof clients. And as you were saying it, my first thought was, did you put on a fake voice
Well, no, he didn't.
or a
He
fake
didn't really
name?
know
Did
me.
you have a fake name? Hello, I would.
He didn't really know me, but I actually asked him some questions, and I think I pushed it too far because I was really trying to figure out. And so, like, I remember I asked him, well, how much would it cost for this? Because I was trying to get a feel for what prices were. And he told me, well, it'd be this much. And then I said, well, this other person is only charging $250 and you're charging $3,000. So can you tell me, like, why, like, what's the difference? Like, why should I pay you so much more? And I was asking because I was like, well, like, how do you justify that? So I can know how I would justify that. And it was he got mad about that.
Which is that's not a good answer from him.
Actually, that's not. That doesn't explain why
that's-
he's so much
that's terrible.
more. Yeah.
Or any time, like we talked about pricing in a previous episode, that would be what not to do. Listeners.
Yeah.
If anyone questions your prices, just get angry.
Yeah, that's not good.
Cool. So to wrap up, really, hopefully we've covered some good stuff today. What would one closing key bit of advice be from each of us? Even if it's slightly repetitive, what would your like key takeaway be?
Communicate and care, I suppose.
I like it. Alliteration. That wasn't my tip. That was me pointing out Ian's alliteration. Lisa?
Yeah, mine's pretty much the same line. If your client feels that you're passionate about their business and want to give them the best, work for them, they'll keep coming back.
I like it. I think mine would be put in the work up front, like I said before, to avoid headaches down the line. And just to give a real quick example, I've actually known designers where they've been questioned on a legal basis as well as complaints, and they can literally read the client's own words back to them and be like, but you did say that, because they've got it all done up front in writing. So I think it's smart to do that.
Yeah.
I think mine would be, as someone who hasn't done this in a long time, is don't hold your cards too close to your chest. And that kind of goes back to being a little bit more transparent with people so they're comfortable. So be okay with telling them a story about how something else worked out, or sharing with them how things break down in a real life scenario. You know, don't make them feel like it's a black box where they put money in and somehow something comes out. Let them know the whole story so they feel comfortable about how it works.
Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode. We hope that it shed some light on how to foster better relationships with your clients in the future. As always, you can find full show notes over at honestdesigners.com, or find us over on iTunes by searching for The Honest Designers Show. This week, I have a special request for you, the listener. If this show has helped you in any way so far, it would mean the world to us if you were able to leave us a quick rating and review on iTunes. iTunes remains one of the best ways for other designers to discover the show, and we're so grateful for everyone who has already left us a review. Thanks again for tuning in with us, and we'll see you next week right here on the Honest Designer Show.